All right, all right, all right. Welcome back to the Misfit Nation. If you're feeling overwhelmed or floating towards the darkness, do not hesitate to phone a friend. If you're embarrassed that you are having this difficult time, call the Veteran Crisis Line at 1-800-273-8255 and take option 1. Again, that's 1-800-273-8255, option 1. As we've told you many times over the last year on this show, do not make a permanent solution to a temporary problem. If you're new to the show, thanks for joining. Be sure to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast apps. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel, _Misfit Nation. That's _Misfit Nation. So you'll stay up to date on all of our episodes as they're released, while also having the opportunity of getting to hear the stories of our amazing guests. Speaking of which, our next guest is one of the leading psychologists to some of the most successful and driven entrepreneurs, pro athletes, executives, and other top performers. In working with these top performers, he has also created a DrivenAssessment and driven shooting meditation. It's as crazy as it sounds. By combining the components of meditation, long-range shooting, and therapy, he helps those with driven characteristics, often wrongfully diagnosed with things such as ADD, HDD, OCD, to harness their hunter abilities so they can stop self-sabotaging, find fulfillment in life, and achieve ultimate success. So without further ado, let's welcome to the Misfit Nation, Dr. Doug Brackmann. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you, Rich. It's good to be here.
It's awesome that we finally got this thing together. I know it's been a little while since we actually were linked in. I think it was December when we were linked together. And I was asked if I'd want you on the show. As soon as I read that first byline about the shooting meditation, I was like, oh, yeah, we need to have Doug on here. I'm glad that we finally got this thing together.
Yeah, I teach meditation at gunpoint. So it's a very interesting blend of, I'm not a typical psychologist, to say the least.
And you're the kind of guy we want around our show then, not typical. That's who we are. We are the Misfit Nation. So, good. Doug, if you'd like, tell us a little bit about your backstory from as far as back as you want to go, or where you came up with this idea to where we are now.
Well, good. So no matter what any psychologist ever tells you, people get into psychology to figure out their own shit. So that's what I did. I promptly blew my life up significantly, wound up living in a car, and profoundly depressed and suicidal at 18. Wow. So I have lived out a big part of my own sabotage. And from that, 36 years later, just an amazing time to be a psychologist and really have dove deep into understanding how I got from that car to here. So it's been an interesting journey.
That definitely sounds like an interesting journey, especially at the age of 18, almost going into the darkness, as I spoke of earlier in the introduction. And a lot of people don't come back from that. I'm glad you have, and you've come up with these new ways to help those who are driven and who are high performers to reach their full potential. How did you come up with the driven concept?
So starts in 3rd and 4th grade. So when I was younger, I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I'm really not, despite all my education, which I got all that education because of insecurity. But 3rd or 4th grade, I'm looking around the class, realizing that I felt really different. And I didn't understand why most people were just going along for the ride. I didn't get it. Why you are spending so much time memorizing multiplication tables and spelling words when this stuff is never going to apply to my life. Like, what the hell is the point? So I had a different way of perceiving the world and felt very different than my peers. Yet I could blend in really well with all of them. So I was a very good chameleon. But by the time I was 18, this feeling that there was something missing or wrong in my world, or missing or wrong with me, this sense of impending doom that I just never could shake, that led me into drugs and alcohol, and led me into dropping out of high school, and led me into blowing up my life, really came to the forefront of my attention. Just, 18, 19, 20 years old, feeling like my life was over, like there's no reason for me to continue on. And amazing time to be a psychologist. So I obviously went back to school, finishing dual PhDs. But at 19, 20, an article came out in Time magazine stating that they found the alcoholism genes these are the genes for alcoholism. It was 1991, long time ago. And turns out that that dopamine receptor that they had found back then, I jumped on it and started to become really curious about why about 8 or 9% of the general population has a constellation of genetics and brain structure that we are different than the 95% of the rest of the world. And that difference, and about that same 93, Tom Hartman wrote a book about being a hunter in a farmer's world. And I jumped on that book. And he was writing a book about his ADD, ADHD kid. And his kid was profoundly ADD, ADHD. And this was, again, early 90s, mid 90s. And it was just when, ADD and all the meds for ADD were coming out. And so he made a hypothesis that there must be a damn good reason why 5%, 8% of the general population has these personality traits that are different. And he came up with this hunter-farmer, meaning that 4,000 years ago, most of the human population, about 90% of the human population, adapted to an incredibly slow, very predictable, safe, routine, boring world. And if you think about what it takes to succeed as a farmer, literally you're wired to sit around and watch shit grow.
Right.
And patiently wait for the harvest. Where the people that I dealt with and people that I deal with and the people like me being one of them, the book is about me, is really, what is it like to be a hunter in a farmer's world? And I took it to the complete next level, and I followed it all the way since then to now, 30 years. And we did a couple of things in the last 30 years as psychologists. One is we developed, we cracked the human genome. So we mapped the entire genetic for all humans. And that was about 10 years ago, 12 years ago. Big point of that is that we can start to see groups of people in different genomes or genetics that, hey, maybe these genetics, influence these. The other thing that happened was this field of epigenetics. And so they always used to say, is it nature or is it nurture? Is it your genes or is it your environment? About 8 years ago, they completely washed that away, and now you can't even separate them. So is it your genetics or is it your environment? The answer is yes. So that combined with this functional MRI. So now we can look inside the brain and look inside the head. And rather than just guessing at what's going on differently, we can actually see what's going on differently. And so what I did was looked at all the ADD, ADHD literature. Thank God there's a lot of it because there's a lot of good meds for it, or at least there's a lot of money to be made on pushing meds on these people. But we are different. And so very simply what and how we're different is, first, genetically, we have a different reward system. So boredom is the simplest way to understand this. There's about 8% of the general population that when they do not have enough novelty in their world, when their outside world is very routine, very predictable, their central nervous system, my central nervous system, I start to get real angsty inside. I start to feel like, this sucks. And that's genetic. It's called boredom. So it's a feeling that there's something missing or wrong right now. And if you're a farmer and you feel that, you're going to wander away from your crops. If you're a hunter sitting in a cave and you never feel that, you'll never go out of the cave looking for food. So there's a good reason that I am wired that, sitting there watching a 2-hour film with my wife and kids on the couch makes me feel nutty. It makes me feel like, ugh. More importantly, this genetic kind of difference is combined with a different brain structure. So my brain, very simply, you put me in a functional MRI, or most of your listeners in a functional MRI, the back of our heads light up, meaning that there's activity in the occipital lobe, or in the parts of our brain that control eyesight. So as a hunter, we use our eyeballs to go through the world. That's where, military, called situational awareness. There's a certain percent of the people that really can feel and see what's going on around them, way more than most. And that was me. A byproduct of this is something called hypo frontality, or a frontal lobe. The front of my brain is not as active as as farmers. So I do something called multi-thinking, where I am automatically kind of seeing the big picture of what's really going on in the world. Where farmers see a very nice series of sequential steps, I see it all at once. And so I do something called multi-think. I have this capacity to actually consider 8, 10, 12 variables at the same time in my brain. And, I used to call it 10, 12 years ago when I was first writing about this, the entrepreneurial mind, because we can see independent patterns and connections between things that other people just don't see. Problem with that is you combine those two things where I feel this impending doom, and I can think about the 13,000 ways that it really does suck. You wind up living in a car. So bad times for Dr. Doug. Because as I write about in Driven and write about more recently in the last year since I've written the book, really it's our identities. I mean, I could have called the book the shame-based personality type, because underneath, this facade that we all have, I always felt like there was something missing or wrong. And I use that as a core bit of my identity. There might be something missing or wrong with me.
Wow.
And if only thinking comes from that. If only I had a PhD, if only I had another degree, if only I had a hotter girlfriend, if only I had another car, if only. And it turned into this unbelievable drive for perfection.
Yeah, I'm sure the pendulum makes you swing that way too. Once you think if only had this, only had that, you start swinging up to the wrong side.
Exactly. And so I just, it leads most of my clients to really creating an outer world, if you're lucky, that really looks amazing. Like my outer world looks amazing. And yet inside it doesn't feel that way, which is the imposter syndrome and all these other psychological psychobabble things. But it felt like, walking out of my dissertation defense, my Dr. Jim Spira, first guy to ever call me doctor, congratulations, Dr. Brackmann. My inner voice, said, haha, he bought it. Because it didn't fit. It didn't feel like it was congruent with what was going on inside my inner world.
Right.
And so that outer world, inner world discrepancy is what gets everybody into my office. And that is where I get this shooting meditation. And I do. So probably you can tell by listening to me, I'm not a typical psychologist, but I was trying to rebrand myself back 2012, 13, 14. And my martial arts instructor, Randy Kelly, retired Navy SEAL, was actually on SEAL Team 3 with, he was a Navy or a sniper. And so he and I would go shooting and we started talking about it. I'm a long-term, I've been shooting 30 years of competitive bench rest, 600,000 yard bench rest shooting.
Wow.
And I said, anything like that, that forces me as a driven person into the present moment, I become addicted to. Anything like that. Why is that the case? And there's this other thing there's another neuropeptide that I write about in the book called neuropeptide Y. It's the best predictor for guys who can make it through Navy SEALs, make it through BUDS training. But what it is in hunters, in the driven brain, we have this neuropeptide that creates something called hyperfocus. And this is where, Duke Nukem and my video game addiction back 20 years ago, where anything, whether it's largemouth bass fishing or my current addiction, which is bow fishing, long range shooting, anything that requires a lot of skill. Golf is another one that I think God never took up because I'm profoundly addicted to. But anything like that that really harnesses my hunter skills. If you think about what it takes to go stick a woolly mammoth in the butt with a spear, you got to have a lot of focus.
Right.
Got to be really driven into the present moment. And, you know, as a psychologist, we call that flow. And it is, as a driven person, it's where I am at my best, where I am really in the zone. And in contrast to boredom, it's kind of two polar extremes for a driven person. We can be incredibly focused and on, and also at the same, 15 minutes later, I can be an impulsive, crazy person where I'm all over the map. And so this switch, being able to turn on and off that switch of really dropping into the present moment, of understanding that, was the key to me really starting to understand how unbelievably gifted this driven thing is. ADD, ADHD, OCD, all these different names that they give us, fed my shame, fed this potential belief that there was something wrong with me. And what I do in the book, and my message is to everybody, you're supposed to be this way. There's nothing wrong with you, but you are different. And learning to harness those differences and take on this gift with these different types of tools, such as this type of meditation, and I'll qualify that. I hated meditation. First time I ever tried to meditate, it was like, what the hell is this? Sit down, close your eyes, and all of a sudden you're supposed to be at peace. My ass. I sit down, close my eyes, and all of a sudden I have 18,000 screaming voices in my head. That is not relaxing. This is not good for me. So
thinking of the next moves.
And that is the key to this being driven requires a different set of tools to actually harness really what we are, where most meditations are created for farmers by farmers, where this style of meditation that I teach, which is eyes open, particularly if you're occipital dominant, meaning that you really are, using your eyesight to ground yourself. It is a trick to actually, and a tool to actually understand that, as a driven person, I have to learn how to reality check my emotion. If I'm wired for impending doom, if I'm wired to feel like there's always something missing or wrong, I will see it. And that's this reversed kind of understanding that I take people through about feelings are not true. They're not facts. Feelings are bullshit. They're lies. But they're the most important thing in the world because they come first. So if I feel scared, what happens is all I see is snakes. If I feel really good, all I see is sticks. And I might step on a snake. So that capacity to actually meet my emotion in a new way, particularly with these feelings of impending doom, was required. I had to learn this. Otherwise, I was going to try to escape. Greatest line I ever heard in an AA meeting is an alcoholic or a driven person is constantly and chronically trying to escape from a reality that never existed in the first place. And so once I understood that, and then I understood how I could harness this gift of neuropeptide Y and harness this gift of focus and my drive. Those two things turned into a really powerful set of tools that I teach to learn how to call bullshit on your feelings. More importantly, develop humility or curiosity really about, how should my life feel or how does my life feel? And that has opened a completely new door to me. And if you're driven and feeling like there's always something missing or wrong in your world, you're not alone. There's nothing wrong. It may be genetic. But most importantly, it is not reality. It's not real.
And it's okay to be different. You got to learn that too, as part of all this, that you're not different bad, you're just different. And if you can harness that and keep your drive alive, that'll help you out. So once you harness your drive, and you talked earlier about your the flow state, how do you master your flow state?
So mastery is what we, mastery is it's a way of being in the world, of never being satisfied, of always trying to get better, and better has no finish line. And so how do you master flow is actually never try to actually perfect it, always try to be better at it.
Okay.
And meditation, and I've pretty much anything that I can get addicted to, I've been addicted to, but meditation is something you can't get addicted to it. And why? Because it is something that is, the moment you think you're satisfied with it, or the moment you think you're getting somewhere with it, you're actually farther from where you want to be.
Oh, okay.
And so how do you get more here? You can't. It's a binary, either it's a yes or a no. So for a driven person, and then the way my brain works, it is the perfect thing trying to master, knowing that I can never master it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
There's a lot of years of study you put into this, last 7 or 8 years since you started doing the long range shooting meditation. Has a lot of your clients caught on to the long range shooting part of this, or do they still look at you like you're crazy until they get in there and do it?
Well, it's so the gun is one of the best teaching tools I've ever found for presenting. And, I start people with 223s with 5.56, and it, shooting at 200 yards, 300 yards, and it very simple targets, big man-size IPSC targets. Then we very quickly go to 600, then we go to 900, then we go to 1200. And I don't care who you are. If you take 3 shots at 1,000 yards or 1,200 yards, and you hit the first 2. The third shot is no different than the other 2. But boy, it sure feels different.
Right.
Because what happens is you start to build all of these expectations about performance based in your identity. Back to where we started, if only I could hit this third time, if only I could go 3 for 3.
Right.
And all of a sudden, we're not present any longer. And more importantly, with the bigger guns, and we shoot out to 2,500 yards, 375 Chi-Tech, it's 7,800 foot-pounds of energy coming out of the front end of this gun. That means it's pushing back with a tremendous amount of pressure. And so I don't give a shit who you are. When you're about to, you're increasing pressure on this trigger. If you're anticipating recoil, you're not present. There is no recoil in the present. And being able to feel those micro impulses of flinching in the body, where you feel that little tiny bit of resistance, that little bit of hesitation as you're squeezing that trigger, is the best teaching tool for firing the neuropeptide Y I've ever seen.
Wow.
Because what you do is you drop deeper into the temperature of the trigger, and is it flat all the way across, and does it have little micro grooves in it, and can I feel those little micro grooves with the tip of my finger? Is it really 2.5 MOA or 3 MOA? And I'm watching the flags, and I'm feeling all of this subtle tiny movement as I'm gently increasing the acceleration on this trigger. And your monkey mind, your brain is screaming at you the whole time. You got to hit it. You got to hit it. You got to hit it. You take a deeper breath and you focus even more on the little tiny dimple in that metal target that you're about to shoot, and even more on the temperature of the trigger, and even more of the feeling of the gun in your shoulder, and even more of the feeling on the ground of all of these different things happening in the present. And as long as you're learning from your last shot, you can't miss. I mean, it's unbelievable how I can take, and I've done this multiple times with a bunch of team guys, I can take a new shooter and most people will go 2 for 3 or 3 out of 1,000.
Wow.
Because it's depending on the wind, obviously. If it's a swirling wind, it's very difficult. But if it's a consistent wind, because if you just follow the process step by step and you're present to every step of the process, it's almost impossible to miss. Because shooting is so consistent. It's me that's the problem. It's not the gun, it's not the wind, it's not the rain, but it's pointing out and putting the problem right in my face of me.
Awesome. That's amazing. When you break it down like that, range time becomes a lot more fun, I believe, for most people. Instead of thinking, I got to. If you break it down like you did, feeling the trigger, feeling the dimple of the target or everything like that, it starts to become more realistic, and you get to hit things a lot more and have a lot more fun at the range, and use those rounds wisely. And that's a good time. So if you want to hold up your book so the audience can see it, I know it's behind you there. There's Doug's book, Driven. That can be purchased online on Amazon, right? And is it in live bookstores as well?
Yeah, it's actually, no, it's all self-published. So it's only Amazon only. You can get 3 chapters of it free off my website. Same with audio. And then come to iamdriven.com is all things Dr. Doug. I got a real assessment on there. It's not just a lead gen assessment, which a lot of websites have. Yes. I have my imposter syndrome is so for real. I created a 50-question assessment, and then I sent it out to a national norming agency where I had it professionally normed for the population of the United States, and then had it validated. So it's real. It's not some bullshit. It gives you the 10 basic qualities of being driven in an assessment kind of way, and then compares you to the national average. And it's real. I mean, there are 4 or 5% of the general population in the U.S., depending upon where you hunt for us. We are different. Yeah. Yeah. We are different.
There's no mail chip that comes out of that, right? Well, Doug, this has been great. How does someone I guess they go to your website to hire you as well, right?
Yeah. And then my shooting retreats, COVID put a stamp on all of that crap, but I'm back up and running. I run them here in Tennessee, and then I've got a range in Ohio that I go to, and I got a beautiful range here in Tennessee. And come visit. I'd love to have you down.
No, I'm not far from you. I'm right up. I'm in Clarksville, so.
Oh, cool. Are you really?
Yeah.
I had no idea. I'd go up hunt ducks in Reelfoot all the time. I'd drive through there all the time.
Yeah.
I'm in Hendersonville.
Not far at all. Yeah, I went down, actually bought my wife's car down there. So.
Cool.
Small world. All right. Well, Doug, this has been awesome. Thanks for taking some of your time to spend with us here on the Misfit Nation.
I appreciate your time, Rich. Have a great day.
You too.